So today I'm going to give you guys a simple way to hook up your modified stereo system to your car. Whether it's subwoofer and amplifier or if you're amplifying your mid-range speakers. First of all, let's start out with the drawing of a body of a car. Nothing fancy here, I'm just going to make a rectangle. This is your firewall. Make a little steering wheel so we know. These are your front two seats, back seats, and then your trunk is right here. Now first of all, let's start off by drawing your speakers. So you're going to have two subwoofers. There's their box. Here's your amp. Next thing we need to draw is your battery. Here's your battery. You got your plus and minus terminal. Now a lot of cars share something similar, and that is that the negative side of your battery is going to be grounded. Two reasons for this is it saves wire, saves money for the car manufacturing, and it saves space. So this is grounded. Let's draw that. So that means your whole body of the car is actually negatively charged. So if I took the positive wire and touched the ground or the body of the car, it'd spark, because that's how it works. Now, first thing you're going to need to do is take a large wire, whatever you need for your amplifier. If you got 1000 watt RMS amplifier, I recommend using around 4 gauge or 0 gauge and going up and down from there. The smaller the gauge, the bigger it is. And the bigger the wire means less resistance and better power flow. See, a wire's like a hose. You got a bigger hose and the water gets through easier than if it was a tiny hose. You don't want a small hose for when you're doing wiring. So bigger wire is better, but there's to a point where you're wasting money. So that's something you need to do research on. So this is pretty simple. You got to get from your positive side of your battery to the back of your car, to your amp. Let me draw the amp right here. This is the side of an amp. You got your positive 12 volt plus source, your REM, which is remote turn on, and your negative, which is your ground. Now, in order to get from here to here, it can be a little tricky because you got something called a firewall. Firewall is a piece of steel between your engine and your passenger and driver side of the seats up front. And I mean, it is important, it is a safety thing, but it is a challenge for us audio kind of people. Now, in order to get through there, you can do several different things. If you want to go completely professional, you can go as far as drilling a hole in here and using a grommet to put the wire through. And that is simple, but you have to get a nice drill, you have to find a good spot, and you have to know what you're doing. Other people say that they can actually find empty grommet holes in this firewall where they can feed the wire through. If you're lucky enough to find it, then do that. That is a very efficient use, because less wire means less resistance, and again, you want the least resistance possible. So, but something you might have to do, instead of going through the firewall, you might have to feed it through the door. And make sure you do it where there's no door hinges or where the door won't pinch it. And that's something, if you absolutely have to do it, then go ahead, but try something else first. I've even done it where I feed through the bottom of the car and gone underneath for a while, came out the other side, back up here. And that's not always a good choice. What I did was I coated the wire going through the bottom with a plasti dip kind of cover so it doesn't erode from salt. But again, I would try going through the firewall. It's your best bet. Also, don't forget to put a fuse. Make sure you get the right fuse, an A&L fuse. Get a fuse holder too. And the fuses are rated by amps, and you can find how much amps you need your fuse to be by taking this simple equation where watts equal amps times volts. Your volts is going to be about 14.4. Your amps are what you're finding, and your watts are whatever your power draw from your amplifier is. So let's say you have a 1000 watt amplifier RMS. Now amplifiers, if it's class D, it's about 70% efficient. So that means it's not pulling 1000 watts, it's actually pulling 1300. So solve for X, and that's how many amps it's going to maximally pull. Now you're not going to put the maximum on there because it's going to blow every time it hits a very loud bass note. You want to go up from there. And generally, if you get a wiring kit, it's going to do that for you. So that's an easy way to go. Now, let's move on to the remote. The remote is also 12 volt positive source, just like the positive side of the amplifier. There's also several ways you can do this. This is something you need a smaller wire for. Don't waste it on a big wire. Use a 18 gauge, that's enough. Generally what you're supposed to do is hook this up. This is the back of a radio head right here. You'll see your wire harness and then generally a blue wire. That blue wire only comes on when your car is on. That's where you hook up to the remote wire. Now there's other ways to do this. Another way is from the positive to the remote, you put a switch in the middle. And this means, when the car's off, you switch it off. Get back in the car, turn the car on, switch it back on. You never want your amplifier running when your car isn't running, because amplifiers actually need more volts. And your battery gives out 12 volts, but your alternator can put out 14.4. So it's better to use it when the car's on. And then another way you can do this is actually hook it up to a cigarette lighter. A cigarette lighter, it's going to be about right there. It's going to have a red wire and a black wire. The red's positive. You tap into the red one, hook it straight up to the remote wire. That way, when you turn the keys onto accessories or onto ignite, then your amplifier turns on, and that's perfect. Again, the main goal here is to make sure your amplifier is turned off when your car turns off, and that's an easy way to do it. Now let's go on to the negative or the ground side of the amplifier. All you simply do is hook this up to the body of your car. Find a place where it's not welded onto another piece and where either there's no paint, or if there's paint, you scratch off the paint with sandpaper or something like that. And then put underneath like a bolt. If you find a metal bolt and a washer, put your splice wire underneath that. And also another thing to remember is your ground wire should be the same gauge as your power wire, which is right here. So power wire would say you have a 4 gauge wire. That means your ground wire should also be 4 gauge. Now make this as short as possible, because again, you're pretty close to it. You just pull out some carpet, and on the other side of the carpet is usually the metal body of the car, and that's where you attach it to. And then so you just go straight from there to the ground. And that's all you have to do. And the way to test this is just turn on the accessories of your car, see if the light lights up on the amp. If it does, then you found a good ground source. If it didn't, check your wires, go back, see what you did wrong. Now another thing is, I'll keep the picture of the amplifier. Let me draw the back of a radio head down here. You got your antenna, you got your wiring harness, and then if you're lucky enough to have these, you have RCA cables. Each RCA input is a positive and negative. So actually this is not positive and negative, it's left and right channels, because each one has a positive and negative. Now if you have that, all you have to do is connect from there to the low end input of your amplifier. I recommend using low end inputs always on amplifiers. Another way to get around using this, if you have a stock radio, you're not going to have the RCA. You're just going to have the wiring harness. What you can do with this is take 2 channels, preferably the back 2 channels, because you really only need your front speakers. So let's say you have these 2 channels. You have your left, you have your right. Each channel is a splice wire, positive, negative, positive, negative. This is your back 2 speakers. So splice it here, splice these 4 wires, and you're going to use something called a line converter. And all it is a little box. It's going to have 5 wires coming out of it. First are the positive, negative, negative. Look familiar? All you do is attach it up. It's really simple. Left to left, right to right. And then in the middle, it's going to have a ground wire. And all you have to do with the ground wire is here, I'll put it on this side right here. Just ground it. You can ground it the same place as your head unit up here. You can ground it to another separate metal piece. You can do whatever you want with that. And see, the thing about on the other side of the line converter is it has 2 RCA ports. Sound familiar? So now you're back to putting in the low end input. So this is just converting your 2 channels of your head unit, stock head unit, to RCA outputs. And these 2 RCA outputs go straight to your amplifier. And it's that simple. Now something I recommend getting also is a variable gain control. If you look on the side of your amplifier, there's going to be something called gain, or it's going to be volume. It's going to say something. And it's just going to be like a little dial, and it's going to have different amounts on the side. This is not the bass boost. Don't get it confused with that. It's just going to have little lines Just any old dial, you know, this is the min, this is the max. It's that simple. Unfortunately, if this amplifier is in your trunk, you're not going to be able to control this when you're driving. And this is pretty much how powerful the subwoofers are going to play at. So something you can get, this comes in a little handy dandy box that can go on your dashboard. And all this is you need to put it between your two RCA cables. So let me draw that real quick since this is the last step. I can go ahead and get rid of the car. So this is what it's going to look like. From your head unit, remember you had the 4 wires, and then you had your ground. Okay, so this is your line converter. It comes out to two RCA outputs, and then from the RCA outputs you go to the variable gain control, and then back out with the RCA outputs to your amplifier. And that's all you have to do. And the thing, what I like about this is, you know, you got songs that have different levels of bass. If you got a song with a ton of bass, you can turn it down. Song doesn't have enough bass, turn it up. You got passengers in the back seat, you know, you can turn it down. The thing is with this, you can have an extremely high level of bass. You know, you're cruising with your windows down, you can have it up all the way. Or if there's sometimes you're just not really in the mood for, you know, bass shaking your car and everything, turn it down to just a nice level. And that's all you have to do. So if you guys have any questions, just comment them. You can request other videos, give me other tips of how I'm doing. So just let me know, guys. Thank you.